Serious people who waited until after marriage to have sex. How did your relationship go and how is your relationship now? Yes, very good advice. Both my husband and I waited for our wedding night for our first, but we also talked about sex a lot leading up to it. Preferred frequency, what turned us on, deal breakers, etc. Our first time was a bit awkward as any first time would be, but overall went extremely smoothly. Overall, all of our discussions also totally panned out. We really do have equal drives and kinks, even though we were mostly just guessing what we would be like in our conversations. We are happy and have a good sex life. I'm so happy I don't have anyone in my mind to compare him to and that he is my one and only, hopefully for the rest of my life. Are there different levels of seriousness for this? Cause I'm wondering if that's something a woman I was with once had, because we could have sex, but I'd get into her and she'd go on and not is a sexy moaning kinda way. We'd try different positions and different speeds and foreplay didn't help. She was a little tight, but I've been with tight women before that didn't seem to have the same problem. A relatively common condition where the vagina muscles constrict involuntarily on penetration. This is painful, and can sometimes make penetration physically impossible. It can be precipitated by previous trauma, but it can also happen by itself. Some women report it happening after childbirth, some women report they had it until childbirth. Prognosis is supposed to be variable, good, treated with physiotherapy and sometimes counseling. There's both a physical and psychological component to it, like erectile dysfunction, and often comes along with strong feelings of shame, anxiety, or guilt. The woman does not control it, and unfortunately too many live with it because they don't know it's something that can be improved. It's an involuntary tightening of the muscles around the vagina, which can make penetration of anything, even one finger, a small tampon, etc., extremely painful or impossible. It's basically a fear of anything entering your vagina, so it often stems from sexual abuse, but a lot of extremely religious people also suffer from it because you're taught your whole life that sex is bad, you shouldn't touch yourself, etc. I have a friend who has neither of those factors, but she has vaginismus, so it's not at all a clear-cut thing as to what causes it and how to help it. Waited for sex after marriage, religious reasons. After 14 years and 3 kids, she came out as gay. We divorced, obviously, and not religious anymore. She has been with the same partner ever since. I found an incredible, and compatible, woman, and after living together for a couple of years, we got married. Been happily married since. The ex and I have a decent, friendly relationship and 3 incredible kids, so it's worked out, but it was a tough road to get here. This hit me so hard. After my parents' splits, my dad always said that he'd be waiting for me to grow up, so I could be free to be with him more often. Unfortunately, my mother is one of those people who weaponized me as much as she could during the separation. I now moved country, and even though my dad is alive and well, there's no day for me going without thinking that I want to spend more time with him to make up for the time lost during the separation. Sorry for the oversharing, but this comment really touched me. Kids are often a lot more observant than parents give them credit for. It's not easy to hide when you and your spouse are not on good terms. You might be able to hide it at a work function you're obligated to attend or at a lunch with friends, but with the kids that live in your house and are around you most of the time. I think my parents were sort of motivated by the staying together for the kids thing, but I know there were plenty of times I just wished they got divorced. Even when they were trying to hide it, it could still make things uncomfortable since you could tell something was up, and then, Of course, there were all the times where they didn't bother to hide it. Not just that, but miserable parents will radiate that through their entire home lives. You do not want to be the kid in the middle of feuding parents. You do not want to be the kid walking on eggshells trying to keep the happy illusion going, and you sure as shit do not want to be the kid who compares their home to others and thinks they are the problem or that they can fix the marriage and then spends the rest of their formative years blaming themselves. We did do counseling, but we were there to fix my problems with sexual needs. She didn't even open up to the counselor. So it felt more like individual counseling. When it started turning towards her, she would get uncomfortable, and it's probably why she wanted to stop going. I don't regret going though, because I learned a lot about myself, and I think my wife got some understanding too, just not for herself. Dude, you don't have a problem other than sexual incompatibility with your wife. It would be one thing if you were masturbating while she was begging for sex, but that's not the case at all. Also, she seems to have major trauma from her HS rape that she doesn't want to deal with. She could really use some individual counseling of her own. Rather than going to counseling to get you fixed, you need to tell her that she needs to go to counseling to get herself fixed, and that you would be willing to participate in some of that counseling as well, but if she refuses to grow, that it means the end. It can mean one person like rough sex all time and the other like slow east sex. It could mean one wants anal every time and the other doesn't. It could mean he wants a blow but refuses to give her one. Maybe she likes adventure and wouldn't mind a quickie in the middle of the desert, and he would never entertain the thought, or that he likes to stick things in his butthole and she refuses. It could literally mean anything. This is why it's so important to discuss sexual preferences. Like, I would never entertain a threesome regardless of gender. If my BF wanted it, I'd break up. Stuff like that. I think if two people who are unwilling to make any adjustments to their daily routine move in together, they're going to have a bad time. Wife and I moved in together when we got married and were obviously aware and understanding that we each have our way of doing things, so it went smoothly. That was really the only adjustment. We already spent every day together anyway, so it's not like we didn't like the other person being around. Not sure why you'd marry someone you don't want around anyways. I remember reading an article by a woman who waited for religious reasons. She said it felt like such a big part of her identity, and when she was getting married, everyone saying wedding night smirking face made her feel like was losing something, and reinforced how it was a part of her. After the deed she felt worthless, but also realized sex wasn't a big deal and there was no real reason to wait, and she regretted waiting and considered it a toxic mentality to force on young women. I'd link it if I knew where I read it. But was an interesting perspective. My husband was my first boyfriend, first kiss, and first sex. We were together for 4 years before we got married and celebrated our 9th anniversary this July. We waited till marriage and we never regretted it. Of course it's not always sunshine and rainbows, but we do love each other very much and have 2 beautiful children together with a third on the way. In the beginning we had to learn what the other one liked and disliked and how to communicate our wants and needs, but now it's just great. Except for the dry spells now and then when the kids are sick or when life gets too busy and we are exhausted, but I think that's a regular issue for parents of little children. Wait until you're married. Then you can have all the sex you want and do anything you want. Not true. I waited. Turns out we're not sexually compatible. Appetite is similar, but preferences are not, and it's a bigger deal than my younger self expected. I want to explore, but my spouse shows zero interest in even trying. It's like it's a hard line that cannot be crossed. Wished I knew that beforehand, but it's super hard to figure these things out if you haven't even had regular sex to begin with. I haven't decided what to do about it yet, if anything. I sort of regret waiting. There's no good answer. You can regret it if you wait, and you can regret it if you don't, so just carefully think through your decision either way and consider which consequences you are most willing to live with. Been married 11 years in a couple of weeks, with 2 beautiful kids. However, I keep wishing I'd spent more time fooling around when I was younger. As much as I love my wife, our sex drives are way out of sync, and that often leaves me wondering what that kind of intimacy would have been like with other girls before she came along. Worth breaking up over? No, although it's definitely been a strain at times. Worth being unfaithful? As tempted as some may be in this situation, no. As I said, I love her to pieces. She's my world. I just wish we were in better sync, and seeing others with healthy sex lives just makes me a little envious. Grass is greener and all that. This is the reason why I told an uber conservative acquaintance to just fuck. I was like, go for it. She was about to hit 30 and still a virgin. I was thinking to myself, as a woman, that you have to figure out your body in order to get any pleasure from sex with a man. Besides that, there was a certain, what to call it, naivete and even immature way she spoke about men and her body. A lot of times, I was actually taken aback as to how a woman her age refused to call things by their anatomical name, or how she was so uneducated on taking care of her vagina in general. I had sex before marriage in high school. The now ex-wife and I waited until marriage. I did not want to, but I respected her wishes. Sex during our marriage was vanilla. Also, she was pretty adamant about how it would go, had to be in the bedroom. I was always the one initiating, and after our oldest kid turned 13, she closed the gates. We ended up getting divorced, for other reasons, but being sexually incompatible played a part. She grew up somewhat religious, and I think she may have been taught sex was dirty. My husband and I waited, and I'm glad. We've been married almost 12 years, and we have a great marriage. It was for religious reasons, but I also think we mentally needed it. I had a boyfriend before who was really pushy about it, and I caved into him. That, combined with the indoctrination of purity culture making me think I was a tainted rose, really messed me up. Also, before we met, my husband had a porn addiction, and he really needed to be clean from that for a while before doing the real thing. For me, it was nice to have someone not pushing me to do something, and for him, it was good to practice not objectifying women. He was the one who really wanted to wait, and there were times we almost crossed the line, but didn't. I'm glad we waited, and it showed me just how patient and moral my husband can be. The experience makes me trust him more. My wife and I dated for half a year, broke up and dated again for a year before getting married. We knew each other for years prior to all this. The hardest part the first time was that making out and such was pretty much the most common thing we did together. It wasn't the expressed focus of the relationship, but if you broke it down, it probably was. That was hard, and it wasn't a great relationship. After time apart, when we talked about dating again, that was the first thing we discussed. How that went and what negative role it played. Leading up to marriage and during marriage. Sex has not been at the center of our relationship. It's almost like a nice bonus. I get to be with the person I love, make life plans with her, work for each other's goals, help each other when we are in need, share all the joyful moments together, and we get to have sex too. We both came from conservative, religious families that made a big deal about waiting, so we did. We started dating our senior year of high school and married at age 21. We just celebrated our 38th anniversary. Both of us agree that if we ever became single by divorce or death, the chances of either of us waiting for marriage to have sex again is pretty low. As for how we are doing today, we have occasional sex, but friendship and companionship is easily more important. I know I've always been faithful and I assume the same about my wife, but maybe you never know. Winking face. We didn't wait for marriage to have sex and ended up getting married rather quickly. We had sex pretty regularly until we got married, then with every year of marriage, the sex got more boring, restrictive, and infrequent every year. Now, 6 years in, we are down to exclusively quickies with no foreplay a couple of times per month, and that is really painful for me to accept, but she insists that nothing is wrong, refuses to talk about it, and she's fine with it the way it is. Waiting until marriage to learn about your partner's sexual stance is a really dangerous gamble. If you aren't sexually compatible, finding out after you are locked into something very hard to get out of is something you will deeply regret, and I assure you it will bring a lot of emotional pain with it. Thanks, that's a really helpful description. I think the values are the same / the end goal of being a better person is the same, but we would never describe it as putting God first. I assumed that meant something like reading the Bible every day, or acting on anything that comes to you in prayer, or giving money to the church before spending on each other, or something. I think of God very differently than you, but appreciate you explaining what this language means, so I see more of the common ground I have with people in my life who speak about this in a way that seems so foreign to me. It's not putting your wants and desires over the needs of your kids. It's more so saying don't neglect your spouse and your marriage to focus 24/7 on your kids. You still need to make time for each other and take care of each other's needs, because your kids will eventually move out and have lives of their own, but your spouse is going to be there for the rest of your life. I've seen plenty of couples who have kids and just throw themselves into their kids' lives to the point where they completely ignore their spouse, and then once the kids are gone they wind up getting divorced because they're basically now living with a stranger, and the kids that they poured everything they had into are moving on and starting their own lives. My husband had partners before me, but after we got together he was willing to wait. We had a lot of almosts though, because we have high sex drives. Once the knot was tied, we went at it like rabbits. A year and a half later and we're so much more experimental, it's become more about the quality and novelty of the act. Instead of having normal PIV every day, it's every other day but a lot more kinky. Sometimes it'll be more frequent, sometimes less. I love it either way. My wife and I are both 28, and 14 months into our marriage. She wanted to wait due to religious reasons, went to Catholic school her whole life, and I had never been in a relationship before. I had a feeling before we got married deep in my gut that we were probably sexually incompatible, and that if we ever got divorced, that would more than likely be the reason why. The frequency we had sex wasn't bad right after the wedding, but it went from maybe once a week down to maybe once every 2 or 3 months within a year. I can probably count on one hand the number of times she initiated. And whenever I try, she gives me some reason why she doesn't want to. She doesn't like when I do it myself, and God forbid I watch porn. We don't have kids, but she says her job, which she hates, makes her stressed, and she says that's why she never wants to have sex. Aside from intimacy, our relationship isn't bad. So I guess only time will tell.